Hello, welcome to the quarterly Parkinson's webinar series brought to you by Cure Parkinson's, the Journal of Parkinson's Disease, and the University of Edinburgh. My name is Tilo Kunath, and I am in the Centre for Regenerative Medicine in Scotland, Edinburgh, Scotland. So today we'll be discussing advancing Parkinson's trial designs, and in particular, multi-arm, multi-stage clinical trials, otherwise known as MAMS. We have today 4 great panelists that will introduce themselves shortly. We're going to go through a series of questions to dissect what MAMS is, and then we're going to open up the floor to Q&A. Simon Stott, Director of Research at Cure Parkinson's, will be handling some of the questions, and we will also be handling them live. But to start off, can I first introduce you to Kuhan?
Thanks, Tilo. Yeah, hi, I'm Kuhan. It's great to be here. If it's not already obvious, I am the person with Parkinson's on this panel. And this month marked 12 years since my diagnosis, my Parkiversary, 12-year Parkiversary. And it was the day after my 50th birthday. So I was diagnosed at 38. So I choose to celebrate both my birthday and my Parkiversary, or at least reflect on both. And for many years, I didn't really acknowledge my Parkinson's to others or even myself. And it's only in recent years I've sort of decided to come out, as it were. And it's quite a common journey, I find, amongst people with Parkinson's. And I've since then decided to immerse myself in what is a wonderful Parkinson's community. And I also find myself giving back in a few different ways. One of the ways I give back is I co-host a Parkinson's podcast, 2 Parkies in a Pod. It's the other Parkinson's podcast, if I can put it like that. And I've also developed an app for people with Parkinson's called Parkinson's On, and it's amassed 4,500 users now, and it's helping people with Parkinson's manage their medication schedule, help with logging and tracking symptoms and activities, and offering some self-help, and also generating some rather useful insights for research purposes. And I've also been getting more involved in research more generally, including being a PPIE representative on the MAMS activity for Parkinson's, EJS ACT-PD, which we're going to speak about over the next hour or so. So great to be here.
Great. Thank you. Thank you. And the podcast, I'm looking forward to speaking at your podcast soon.
You are. Tino's going to be on next month, so look out for that.
Great. Georgia, please introduce yourself.
Thanks, Tilo. Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for having me here today. My name's Georgia Mills, and I'm the Research Project Manager for the project that Kuhan just spoke about briefly, the EJS ACT-PD project, or as that stands for, the Edmund J. Sufferer Accelerating Clinical Trials in Parkinson's Disease project. So this is a project that's being co-led by University College London with Professor Tom Fultony and Newcastle University with Professor Camille Carroll. It's a really exciting project. You might have heard about it before, but essentially over the past 4 years now, we have brought together a consortium of more than 90 members, including people with Parkinson's and their carers and partners, to design a new clinical trial for Parkinson's disease, which we hope will help to speed up the process of how we assess treatments for Parkinson's. And during that time, we've also achieved lots of other really great processes for the wider Parkinson's research field. We've developed processes for how we select the most promising treatments to include in the trial, how we select the most appropriate outcome measures or assessments that we use to check if those treatments are working. We've worked with sites across the UK to think about how NHS sites can deliver Parkinson's research and how we can help to build upon that. And very importantly, we've worked with brilliant people with Parkinson's, carers and partners such as Kuhan to think about how we can make the trials easy to take part in and also a really positive experience to take part in. So I've been managing the day-to-day runnings of that and really excited to talk to you more about it.
Thank you. Yeah, we really look forward to talking about that today. Emma, please.
Thanks, Tilo. Hi, everyone. It's a real pleasure to join your community today. I'm Emma Gray, and I'm Director of Research at the MS Society. So that's the Multiple Sclerosis Society. So I'm the outsider here. I'm actually a neuroscientist by background. I worked on Alzheimer's and motor neuron disease. And I work for the Multiple Sclerosis Society. And I've actually worked, really closely with the MS community probably for about 10 years to develop a clinical trial, a MAMS trial that we've named Octopus because of its multiple arms. It will all become more obvious when you hear all the descriptions. And I've also been sharing my experiences over the years of Octopus with the EJS ACT-PD team. So I know Georgia, you know, talking about how you set it up, how you select treatments and all the processes that we went through. So Octopus itself, obviously this is an MS trial, but I'll to give you a bit of background, is run by UCL, and it's the first and only MAMS trial for multiple sclerosis. And, you know, we are desperately looking for, you know, treatments for people to slow down the progression of MS, so the neurodegenerative part of it. And we're testing 2 drugs, metformin and lipoic acid, for 3 years. And 18 months into the trial, participants have an MRI analysis to see if it's giving us a hint of whether that drug might be working. It opened in February 2023, and it's really built on the principles, as you know, the Parkinson's community work this way, as of really collaboration. So it was co-designed with people with MS, working with neurologists, statisticians, healthcare professionals, and basic scientists to kind of design all aspects of the trial to make it, you know, truly acceptable to the community. So yeah, I really look forward to our discussions today, and it's fantastic to be here. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Emma. Yeah, it'd be great to hear what we can learn from the MS trials. And last but not least, Harris from Norway.
Yes, thank you, Tilo. So my name is Harris. I'm a professor of neurology and neurogenetics in Bergen, Haukeland University Hospital in Bergen, Norway. I work with Parkinson's disease. I run, with my team, we run clinical studies, clinical trial on Parkinson's disease. Among these, a brand new platform, which we will be talking about in a minute, including a multi-arm, multi-stage, a MAMS platform for both de-risking and for efficacy testing of new treatments in Parkinson's disease.
Great, thank you. So let's stick with you, Harris. Let's start at the very, very beginning. So we're using the MAMS acronym a lot, etc. So let's just bring us all on the same page. What is a MAMS platform, and how does it compare to a traditional clinical trial platform?
Absolutely. So it is really a groundbreaking advancement or innovation in the field of clinical trials for any disease, really. In particular for a disease like Parkinson's disease, where we have the challenge of, you know, still not having found a disease-modifying treatment, a treatment that is able to delay or stop disease progression. So, you know, in the context of clinical trials, comparing a MAMS trial, a multi-arm, multi-stage trial, to a classical or traditional trial, there are many differences and many advantages to the MAMS design. First of all, in a MAMS trial, we are testing several treatments, several candidate treatments in parallel, simultaneously, rather than testing them one at a time, as one does in a traditional clinical trial. This means, of course, that things move faster. And for the people affected by Parkinson's disease, this is good because it means shorter time to potential breakthroughs. Also, because now there are many ways to rig a MAMS platform or a MAMS trial, but, you know, I think most MAMS trials do it in the way that you are testing multiple treatments against or compared to a common control or placebo group. So due to this, you also need less patients. And since you need less patients or participants, it is also cheaper. It requires less resources, which also facilitates things and also shortens time to breakthrough. Last but not least, you know, it's not only multi-arm, it's also multi-stage, meaning that it seamlessly progresses across the different stages of clinical trials towards an approved treatment, again, saving time.
Great. Brilliant. Saves money, saves time, and shorter time to potential breakthroughs. It sounds excellent. So Kuhan, why is a MAMS trial important for someone with PD, and what do you think of these MAMS trials?
Well, I think you both said the key word just then, time. Time is what I don't have, and saving time is what this platform potentially offers. It's frustrating to look at or to count clinical trials in years, in decades sometimes, when I feel my progression every day. I remember a few years ago looking back at what was a rich pipeline of of clinical trials for Parkinson's, a promising pipeline. And today, when I look back, they've all either failed or yet to finish. And when you're living with a degenerative condition like Parkinson's, that's really particularly disheartening. As people with Parkinson's, we very much feel time and the passing of time. It's a very precious commodity, and that's what I'm hoping this platform will allow us to do. Save time and act as a stepping stone for that in search of the ultimate thing that we're looking for, which is a cure or a significant breakthrough.
Thank you, Kuhan. That was really, really well said. Thank you very much. Emma, can you expand on sort of Harris's points about the advantages of MAMS platform and maybe also some of the challenges of a MAMS platform?
Yeah, of course. Just want to kind of reiterate Kuhan's sentiment, because in the MS community, people with progressive MS feel the same. We've had loads of breakthroughs in MS for kind of the relapsing, the earlier stages of MS, lots of disease modifying treatments. But there's sort of 60, 70,000 people in the UK with progressive MS that feel they've got nothing, and science has failed them. So there's kind of this ethical responsibility I think we all have to really try and drive these things forward in the most efficient way possible. So I didn't answer your question, Tilo, but I just wanted to echo the sentiment. So in terms of other advantages, it really is a really efficient concept. So we've heard from Harris about how the blended stages. So when you do clinical trials, there's lots of different stages you need to go to before a drug can be licensed. And often what you have is, with a stage, you have it starts and then it stops. You have to apply for another grant to get the next stage. So you have all these gaps in between all the bits you need to do to get a license, and it just becomes really long and really inefficient. So the blending of the stages is really an interesting concept. I mean, I would say the challenge of that, whilst it's a really efficient way to do it, you need some really clever mathematicians to help you navigate that. So this is really our experts leading this, and you need to have that expertise wrapped around the design. I'd say it's efficient. It is definitely a far more efficient way of doing it, but I wouldn't say it's cheap. These are big. These are big beasts, these platform trials, and require a lot of expertise. There's also, because these trials are adaptive, and there's lots of different ways you can adapt a trial to make it efficient. You can, when science allows, add in new arms when you discover a treatment that's worth testing, and that means the people that are in the trial already, if the treatment that they're on hasn't shown any benefit, they could have a chance to be randomized into the new arm. So it kind of just keeps going. It gives people an opportunity to be, part of something for the long term. And there's also the opportunity that these platforms, because they create large data sets, they can be linked with other projects. So actually they can answer questions about Parkinson's research and unanswered questions that are not just about, does this treatment work? You can answer questions about biomarkers. You can answer questions about quality of life, health economics. There's lots of things you can do with these things to really make them, fantastic research tools as well. I think that's enough enthusiasm from me.
It was excellent. No, yeah, I think I get your point about it. It is costly, but I guess comparing a cost to doing 5 clinical trials separately.
Yeah, I mean, there's no comparison. Yeah, I mean, the MS trial is costing us 13 million. So, and it's all funded by the UK MS Society. So, for us, it's an enormous grant. And I guess that's one of the challenges possibly as well, is the long-term financial sustainability of these sorts of platforms, finding all the partners to come together to want to make, it's efficient, but it's still large, and having that long-term commitment from partners to keep these things going, because that's what we need to do. We need to not stop them. We need to just, as science moves, we need to change them and add them and change the outcome measures, change the drugs. So yeah, it's keeping them, the model for the future is another challenge, I think.
Thank you, Emma. That was brilliant. So Georgia, can you tell us about the UK Parkinson's MAMS trial and pointing out some of these advantages, but also some of the challenges in the co-funding structure, etc.
Absolutely. So yes, as I mentioned earlier, we've spent a very long time designing this trial. As Emma mentioned, it does take a lot of time, a lot of expertise to put this all together. And there's lots of different things to consider, including the overall trial design, the treatments you select, the outcome measures you select, and thinking about how that can all work to be combined in a single trial. So it's taken us a few years now, but we are hoping to, well, we will be launching the trial to recruitment this year. So to give a bit of an overview of the trial itself, it's a multi-arm, multi-stage platform trial. We'll be launching across the UK in 40 NHS sites. So we'll be opening in England, Wales, Scotland, and Northern Ireland. We really wanted to try and get that really widespread coverage across the UK so that we can provide an opportunity to take part in this research trial to as many people with Parkinson's as possible. And when we open the trial, we'll be starting with 3 treatment arms or treatment groups. 2 of those will be active treatment. So the first 2 treatments that we test will be telmisartan and terazosin. And then the third arm will be our placebo arm or the dummy drug arm. And that's a really important arm because without that arm, we can't check if the other drugs are actually working or not. So that's such a key element of these trials as well. And about 12 months after the trial opens, we'll be launching our third active treatment arm, which will be UDCA. So within a year, we'll have all of those 4 arms open. And as Emma mentioned, with MAMS trials and the infrastructure that gets set up, they are flexible in that you can introduce new treatment arms in the future, which means essentially you can sustain this trial and the trial infrastructure for as long as you need to find a treatment that actually works. But of course, that is subject to continued funding and continued input to help design and deliver the trials. So our funding initially is for those first 3 treatment arms and the placebo arm. And those treatments have been picked because they went through a very robust treatment selection process, and we think they're the most promising to slow or stop Parkinson's disease. So that's really the goal of EJS ACT-PD, is we want to find a treatment that can slow or stop the progression of Parkinson's symptoms and stop them from getting worse. We will be, of course, doing the checks, the early stage checks, to see if the treatments appear to be working or not, and any treatments that don't show any benefit of those checks or show enough activity, they will be stopped. Or if they do show enough activity, we'll continue recruiting to those until we have enough evidence to say whether they definitely work or not. And the trial itself is a very large trial. We are hoping to recruit up to 1,600 people with Parkinson's across the UK. We know this is a large ask. We've put lots of work, especially with our patient and public group as well, into thinking about how we can make the trial as easy as possible to take part in. So to try and support this very large recruitment number, we've designed the trial to be able to be delivered in a hybrid way. So what we mean by this is that after the very first appointment, which will take place in person at your closest study site, you can choose whether to take part in the rest of the appointments either online or in person. So if it's easier for participants, they can do the rest of the appointments from home. They would be sent a link with which will take them through to all of the study assessments that they can complete online, and they would have a video or a telephone call with a member of the study team to do any of the other assessments that they need to do with a clinician. Or if people prefer to go in person, they can go into the local study site for their appointments as well. So we're trying to make it as easy as possible. And this has also caused its own challenges in terms of how we set up all of those assessments. We're having to design a bespoke database for the trial to be able to collect all of that data. And we're also working with sites to make sure that they're able to deliver the trial in this way as well, and can accommodate people that do want to take part from home. So if you were interested in taking part, the very first step would be to complete a registration of interest form. That's not live yet. That will be live closer to the time of recruitment. But that form will just collect a little bit of information about the person with Parkinson's, and we'll also ask some questions that will help us to identify any immediate reasons why you wouldn't be able to take part. If there's anything you're unsure of or that the study team's not sure of, there'll be a phone call as well, just to make sure. But we don't want to have people come in only to be told they can't take part. So we've just added this extra step in so we can gather that information initially, and sites can have a look at that information and will be aware of that before they speak with you about the trial. The next step would be coming in for the first appointment. That one will always take place in person. And that's really important because that's the appointment where you discuss the trial in more detail, decide if you actually want to take part, have some checks to see if you're able to take part or not, and also have any samples taken as well. And then if you were taking part in the trial, you'll be allocated to one of the treatment arms. No one will know what treatment arm you're on, neither the participants or the clinical team. That's all all hidden so that we can look at the results and make sure they're accurate. And then you would continue to have appointments every 6 months for up to 3 years. And the only reason that would be shorter is if you decided you didn't want to take part any longer, or if you're on a treatment arm that ends early. And if you were on a treatment arm that ends early, as Emma mentioned, we are including a process to be rejoined in the trial and re-randomized to a new treatment arm once that treatment has left your system. And as some more exciting parts of the project, because we are setting up a trial that's really large, going to have lots of different participants, produce a really rich database of information and help us to understand more about Parkinson's disease itself, as well as the treatments that we're testing. We want to make the most of that and include as many new things as we can that help us on that journey of understanding more about Parkinson's. So we are including some smaller sub-studies, as we call them. These are optional, but they will be testing digital devices that can track symptoms of Parkinson's disease and provide us with richer information. And we will also be including some additional blood samples and spinal fluid samples so that we can run some additional tests on those and look for any internal markers that can help with our understanding of Parkinson's as well. And the initiative itself that I'm managing will be running for another 5 years so that we can carry on thinking about all of these different elements and ways we can improve the trial and adapt the trial to make it as efficient as possible throughout the time that it's running. So we can carry on improving that, carry on thinking about any new evidence that comes out, and just make sure that the trial is always running in the best way possible. Yeah, I think that's probably everything on that.
I think it's really exciting, and I think information about how to register will be very much sought after, but that will be also emailed out from Cure Parkinson's to all the registered people. We can get to this in the Q&A, but I really want to hear from Harris and what's happening in Norway and how are the trials, the MAMS trials, being set up there.
Right. So, I mean, we have we're setting up this dual platform essentially, and there are two names involved here, two platforms which work in a very close collaboration, or they feed into each other. We have the so-called Sleipnir platform, inspired by Nordic mythology. It was Odin's horse with 8 legs. And we have the big Hydra platform, again, this time inspired from Greek mythology, the multi-headed beast. The reason being that both of them are multi-armed, or they have several compounds being tested in parallel. So I'll start with the larger one, and I'll explain why in a second. So the large platform, the Hydra platform, is a multi-arm, multi-stage study or platform trial, very similar to the EJS ACT-PD. There are small differences. Here we are including 200 participants per arm, so there will be a total of 800 people. That also reflects the smaller population of Norway compared to the UK. There's only 5.5 million of us, but we have national coverage. The entire country is covered here. Very similar to the EJS ACT-PD, we will be assessing disease progression using primarily clinical endpoints, so the severity of symptoms in our patients or participants. We will have a very dynamic aspect to this, in the sense that, again, like EJS ACT-PD, we will have some checkpoints, at which checkpoints we will be able to, based on preliminary assessments, say something about treatments that potentially do not work at all. This is what we call futile, or futility in the lingo of these trials. And participants who are in those arms where the treatments are deemed to be futile will be stopped, and potentially, if still eligible, they will be re-randomized to non-futile treatments, meaning treatments where there's still hope that they might work. In addition to participants who have not yet been recruited, but who were going to be recruited, the quotas, if you want, into those arms will be then recruited into the non-futile treatments, meaning the treatments where there is hope for success. Again, thinking of feasibility, these are large numbers of participants. To make it, or to keep it feasible, the way we're going to do it is that until the futility check, we will have a very light protocol, essentially only assessing clinical outcomes, clinical symptoms, not doing anything more advanced or expensive, such as imaging or collection of cerebrospinal fluid. These things will be added once we have potentially a non-futile treatment or more. Now, the role of the smaller brother or sister of Hydra called Sleipnir is to de-risk compounds that potentially will enter Hydra or potentially other MAMS platforms. So Sleipnir is a small, rapid turnover multi-arm platform where we will be including or enrolling approximately 20 to 30 individuals, participants per arm, 3 or 4 arms compared to a common control group. And these will be short trials, as a rule, not more than 3 months, with the intent not to assess whether a treatment works or not, because Hydra will do that, with the goal to assess whether treatments enter the brain, and if they do enter the brain, whether they engage, as we call it, the mechanism, the pathway, the biological process that they're supposed to target. So in other words, the Sleipnir platform will tell us, once each cycle is finished, whether the treatments tested, again, whether they find their way into the human brain. And this is, this is important because a lot of substances look great in the lab, but do not cross into the human brain. So that it will tell us whether these substances cross into the human brain. And if they do so, do they act in the way we want them to act? Do they influence the mechanisms and the pathways we want them to influence? If they do so, then those substances will be nominated for further testing to see whether they can delay disease progression, either on Hydra or on the EJS ACT-PD platform or one of the other multi-arm platforms starting around the world.
Superb. Yeah, I really like this two-stage model, a smaller de-risking trial moving to the larger phase 3 MAMS trial, either in the UK or in Norway. I didn't realize Sleipnir could feed into the UK trial, which is fantastic. Kuhan, how have people with Parkinson's shaped the ACT-PD trial? What was your involvement?
Well, from what I've seen, and I joined the program slightly late, but people with Parkinson's and their partners have been embedded in the program from day one. I myself have been involved for, I think, 2 or 3 years. And what I've seen and what I've experienced is an embedding of people in each of the steering groups. So in each group, there is at least 2 people with Parkinson's representing the voice of people with Parkinson's and making sure that voice is heard. Additionally, there's a wider, dare I say, more diverse advisory panel that can be tapped into where needed. And I'll just give you a couple of examples of where people with Parkinson's have made a difference to the program. Voicing the importance of non-motor symptoms when determining outcome measures. I keep hearing that the cardinal symptoms of Parkinson's is a slowness, stiffness, and tremor. But when I talk to other Parkies, what I hear about is things like sleep, fatigue, anxiety, and so on. So we've been consistent in raising the voice or emphasizing the importance of non-motor symptoms. We've also been, I think, quite crucial in some of the practical aspects as well. Things like people's tolerance for taking X number of pills a day and the size of the pills and so on. I think that's been quite invaluable. One thing I would say, and I'm sure Georgia will testify to this, is that people with Parkinson's, we don't always agree. You ask 10 different people with Parkinson's the same question, you'll get 12 different answers. And that's just the nature of the condition. But one thing I would say, we may not always agree, but we are always heard. And I think the program has gone out of its way to listen to the voice of people with Parkinson's. And I think that's paying dividend. And I very much hope that will continue. And I very much hope that will be a template for all trials where patient involvement is embedded from day one and throughout.
Super important. No, I'm really, really pleased to hear that. Thank you, Kuhan. So the patient voice is being heard throughout and from the beginning. Emma, what about recruitment? There's lots of excitement in the Q&A. Everyone wants to sign up. So I'm almost thinking recruitment might not be a problem, but it is an issue with trials. So what have you experienced with Octopus?
I mean, you're right. If you can't recruit to a trial, you don't have a trial. I mean, fundamentally, and if you can't recruit at the right rate, you lose your efficiencies and things like that. So it's really, really important. And actually, we spent quite a lot of time thinking about this, and also we wanted to make it an inclusive and opportunity for a diverse group as possible. Ethically and for lots of reasons. People have poor access to clinical research. So we made it as wide as possible age groups. People can be up to age 70, which I mean, I don't know what happens to the Parkinson's trials, but it used to be 60, 65, and that was the upper limit. We had a limit on how disabled you could be. So it'd be like if you could no longer walk, because some of the outcome measures we use are based on walking. It meant that people who could no longer walk or ride in wheelchairs couldn't take part. So we changed the outcome measures to include measures of upper limb function. So the people who, saving upper limb function absolutely keeps people independent. So it was really, really important to consider these things. We worked really closely with people with MS to make sure that every aspect of it was as accessible as possible, thinking about how you collected data, even having vegan capsules, all the small things you need to think about to ensure everyone can take part. And then you need the real experts in trial design, delivery, and clinical trials to help you deliver it. We also set up, as Georgia mentioned, we had a registration of interest portal we set up for people with MS to join. And we have a registry of people with MS in the UK. So they joined up via our UK MS register, which is really helpful because you can link that data then to the clinical trial data. We've recruited over 400 participants now in about a year and a half. It's gone really well. Actually, and I think you hinted to this, we're at the point now we have 3,000 people who've registered their interest who are potentially eligible. So now we have potentially more people eligible than the trial at the moment can take. So now we're considering sort of managing expectations for people, and we all know people benefit from being in trials, and we want as many of the community to have a chance. So now we have to think about, well, people are registered now, should they get a chance when new arms are added in to go first, or the people already in it, should we consider them? So there's lots of ethical decisions that you now have to think about, and our patient community are absolutely vital to help us navigate that. So I'd say it's been a lot of work, lots of lessons learned, but actually the patient community often get it quicker than some of the clinicians, and for them they're like, why have you not done this before? Like, just hurry up and get on with it. It's been a really positive experience, I'd say. So I'd say for the Parkinson's, I mean, I'd imagine you'll have a very positive reaction from your communities as well.
Good. That's really encouraging. Georgia, what are your thoughts on recruitment for ACT-PD or just Parkinson's trials in general?
Yeah, so I will say Octopus has very much been a roadmap for us when we're designing this. So we've been able to really take advantage of all of their learnings and apply them, which has been incredibly helpful. But we've also thought, very specifically about recruiting from the Parkinson's population and the different challenges that are unique to that population, how we can overcome them. I mean, I think one thing that's probably actually applicable to all research trials is making sure that people hear about them and are informed about them and aware that they're happening and are offered the opportunity to take part. So we really want this to be something that just happens at clinical appointments with clinical teams for people with Parkinson's. And we've been working to build engagement with different clinical teams across the UK to make this as easy as possible for them. So we will have 40 sites, which, as I said, widespread coverage, which is great. And the registration of interest form also means that people with Parkinson's can reach out to us directly without having to go to a clinical appointment first to get the information about the trial. All the information, the participant information sheets will all be online and accessible. But we're also working with sites and site staff to think about how we can just make it as easy as possible for them to fit this information into their, very time-limited appointments and different communication materials we can produce. So that's one thing. But a few things that our patient and public group raised specifically that we've, as Kuhan said, has been really integral into our design and has definitely made huge impacts in how we've designed the trial. One thing is off assessment. So lots of research studies in Parkinson's disease want people to be off their medication when they have their assessments. And we had feedback that that's something that can really put people off. It's not enjoyable to be off medication. It can make it harder to travel to appointments and to attend appointments. So all of the assessments in the trial will happen when participants are on medication. They don't have to stop medication at all to take part. And also the hybrid design that I mentioned earlier, it makes it easier for participants to take part for lots of different reasons. With Parkinson's, as it progresses, people might face mobility issues, or people might live in locations where it's hard to travel, and that can be exacerbated by mobility issues. So having that chance to continue taking part and just swap from in-person appointments to taking part online, we hope will be really helpful, and something that means people can take part for the whole time of the trial. And also medication. People with Parkinson's are probably already taken often a lot of different medications, a lot of tablets each day. And as Kuhan mentioned, that's something we really discuss with our patient and public group. So the first 2 treatments is 1 medication a day. The third treatment is more tablets, but we have worked with the manufacturer to create a new formulation of that tablet to reduce the original number based on the feedback we received. And all of that medication will be delivered direct to home, so no one's got to travel to pick it up. So I think they're just a few of the points specific to the Parkinson's population we've tried to manage to improve recruitment.
Brilliant. Thank you, Georgia. All these small things are really, really important in health. Harris, what are your thoughts on recruitment in Norway, especially in terms of diversity and socioeconomic background?
Yeah, absolutely. So Norway, and as a non-Norwegian myself, I can say this. This is one of the areas where Norway really excels. It is really an excellent place for doing clinical trials. There are many reasons for that. Our trials recruit from the entire country, and that's literally the entire country, from the smallest village to the largest city. And this is thanks to the very good infrastructure, but also the incentives by the Norwegian government to support participation in clinical trials. For instance, travel expenses, anything from airplanes, taxis, to parking expenses, as well as accommodation expenses to participate in clinical studies, treatment studies, are always covered 100% by the Norwegian state. So this, of course, helps us doing the trials, because it means less, resources are required from the research funds, but also it facilitates patients from anywhere in the country, even from the remote islands of Norway, to participate in the trials. So on every visit, they can travel as far as they have to. In terms of diversity, Norway has a fairly flat health system. We do have the expertise centers, but more than 95% of all people with Parkinson's disease in Norway are followed by a neurologist in the public system, the public health system. So essentially, we don't really have any skewness or any uneven distribution with regard to socioeconomic factors or heterogeneity. The northern indigenous Norwegian population, the Sami people, they also have access to the trials through the Northern Norway University Hospital, the University of Tromsø, which is a strong site participating in all our trials. So we really have national coverage and very, very good recruitment rates. We recruit from a total of 17 hospital centers at the moment, and it really, the recruitment rates are really great.
Excellent. Yeah, very inclusive. Sounds amazing.
I can add, Tilo, that because I forgot to mention, apologies, I can add that also the participation rate is very high. So the consent rate and participation rate for our patients is well over 95% at the moment when asked to participate in a clinical treatment trial.
Maybe we need to lobby the UK government for that kind of infrastructure support, because travel expenses and things like that are a real problem, and you end up recruiting people that can afford to either get themselves there, live within an hour of yours. It really is, it has such an impact on diversity. It's amazing that Norway do that, I have to say.
Emma, absolutely. And I actually experienced this difference, because this rule, this thing happened while I was here working in Norway. So it really made a huge difference in participation and equal opportunity to participate.
Yeah, it's amazing.
Sounds like something to lobby for, without a doubt. Kuhan, what hope do MAMS trials bring to people with Parkinson's? What are your final thoughts before we go to Q&A?
Sure. Well, hope is a difficult thing to balance in Parkinson's, and I do think it's a balancing act. In one respect, nothing short of a cure or a significant breakthrough is going to cut it. But if we are going to try and in some cases fail, let's do it quickly. Let's learn the lessons and let's move on. And that's what I think a MAMS trial offers. And I think I'm right in saying that this was born in COVID times. And I think we need to sort of acquire or reacquire that sense of urgency that we had in COVID. Okay, Parkinson's is not COVID, but I think of it as an epidemic of sorts. Its numbers are doubling every 20 years, and people are really suffering. I think we need that kind of level of urgency that we had in COVID and the focusing of minds, not just resources, to tackle this. I don't want to look back in another 10 years and feel the same level of frustration that I've had in terms of slow progress. So, going back to that theme of time. Finally, every person with Parkinson's I talk to says the same thing. They want progress, not just for themselves, but also for their loved ones, because they very much live and feel Parkinson's every day in a way that's perhaps even more frustrating, because they are literally helpless, and as people with Parkinson's, we feel and see that frustration on their faces every day. So if not for me, then for them, and if not for them, then for future generations. We really need to speed up, because time is a precious commodity that we're all running out of, but people with Parkinson's, our quality of life is diminished, and we want some of that back. And I'm hoping a MAMS platform like EJS ACT-PD will help us get there.
Beautifully said. No, the issue of time and urgency is absolutely coming through loud and clear. We have 20 minutes left, and we have a number of questions we're going to try to cycle through. Georgia, you said the drugs really quickly. I got UDCA as the third drug, but maybe you can go through the first two and UDCA. Why were they picked, and what did they do?
Yes. So the first two drugs are telmisartan and terazosin. They are both blood pressure medication originally, and UDCA is a medication that's used to treat liver disease. So all three of them show promise in potentially slowing or stopping progression of Parkinson's symptoms. How we arrived at those choices is our treatment selection working group they designed and implemented a very rigorous process that looked at a whole range of evidence, including preclinical evidence, any evidence from clinical trials they'd already been included in, and also thinking about different pharmacological factors. So I will say I'm not a clinician, so I can't comment too much from a clinical perspective, but they went through a long process that started off, I think, with 293 compounds identified, and we ended up shortlisting to these three. That included all of the evidence and a scientific review with all of our steering group members, but it also included input from our patient and public group on things around acceptability, on how the drugs are taken, on the different side effects, on the different monitoring activities that sites would have to do to see whether these drugs are acceptable, and also to think about if someone's on the trial taking them, are they likely to continue, or are these side effects or activities going to be too much that they won't want to carry on? So all of that was considered. And we also had to think about how the drugs could be used in the trial design. So are we able to blind the drugs easily so no one knows what they're taking? That's quite a big challenge in MAMS trials. And also, can we afford the drugs? So there was lots of things to consider, and it really was a very robust process that led us to these three treatments that hopefully will show some promise in slowing the symptoms.
Great. Thank you, Georgia. Harris, can I ask you about all the other medications that people take? So someone's asked about, if you're on these different medications, how does it affect the trial, or maybe getting on the trial? Is are you excluded from some trials based on your medications?
So do you mean symptom treatments, like dopaminergic treatments?
No, I think the question was about statins, blood pressure tablets. So other medications not related to Parkinson's.
Right. No, as a rule, not, unless they would be excluded if the medication they are taking, for instance, for a blood pressure treatment or heart disease or whatever, if that medication interferes with the medication being tested, then they would be excluded, not otherwise.
And it's often there's another question about stopping medication. And I think people do stop medication briefly for a test, but the normal standard of care, I think, doesn't change. I don't know if Georgia wants to address that.
Yes. So in the EJS ACT-PD trial, no participants will be asked to change their normal standard of care. We understand this is different for all participants, and it might change throughout the trial, and that's absolutely fine. Any treatments that have been taken outside of the study medication are just recorded, so we can use those in the analysis if we need to, but no one will be asked to stop.
Emma, I want to get your opinion on inclusion criteria and exclusion criteria. Someone's mentioning about age. You mentioned the age 70, which is young, which is not very old. And what is the situation in MS, and how might it be different for Parkinson's?
Yeah, I mean, I guess, MS affects, I think, a broader age range possibly than Parkinson's. So you can actually even get children that have MS, sadly. It's rare, but it does happen. So most people are diagnosed often 20s and 30s. And often people, become fairly disabled by the time. I have to be careful. I don't know who the audience is older. I don't want to offend anybody. So I think that the trials have tended to be, I think, in a younger cohort of people. And the trials have mainly focused around relapsing MS, which often people are younger. But, it's not ethical to exclude a large portion of participants from trials. There is now a couple of MS trials that have actually taken age limits off completely. I think there's always concerns about, especially as you get older, and with MS, you get lots of other conditions at the same time, so taking lots of different treatments. So you still want to make sure that you can differentiate the effect of your drug. So there's always a balance you have to make, but we wanted to make it as inclusive as possible. The people with MS said to us, right, we want it older, we want to be more disabled, we want, and tell the statisticians, you work it out, how to power it. So I think that's the approach we took, is, we asked the community, what do you need? And then we challenged the statisticians to kind of figure it out. So we are looking at whether we could completely remove an age cap. That's something we're considering, but at the moment it's 70. And I think there's a few medications you can't be on. There's some issues around alcohol. It kind of depends on the drugs that are going in, but you can stratify your randomization so that people can be put on certain arms if they have certain restrictions. So I think, my experience was people with MS said what they wanted, and we told the statisticians to fix it and find a way to make it happen. I think that's the approach we've taken to this. And I think that's the only way you can do it, really. The patients drive the design, and statisticians have to do the maths.
Excellent. Thank you, Emma. So the ACT-PD trial, you mentioned the first step would be a registration of interest, Georgia. Can you predict the month that might start?
We're working towards a launch at the minute in summer of 2025. So the plan is to make that registration of interest form live a few weeks before we open to recruitment, because we don't want lots of people signing up and then having to wait a really long time. So we want to do it close to recruitment, and once people do register, we will keep them updated with communications to let them know how the trial's progressing, what sites have opened, where we're opening next, and hopefully keep everyone in the loop with that. So summer 2025 is what we're working to at the minute.
Great, thank you. So summer of 2025 is the predicted registration time. So Kuhan, can I get your thoughts on the Norway model and how it contrasts with the UK model in terms of the inclusivity, and Norway, providing all this funding for travel? What are your thoughts on that?
Well, it was actually interesting to hear, and I was reflecting on the differences. As a person with Parkinson's, I don't need a financial incentive to take part. Quite frankly, my incentive is I want a better life for myself, and my friends in the community, and those that follow us. I think there is a challenge around overall numbers. I heard there's less than 1% of people that take part in clinical trials with Parkinson's, which I think sounds very low. I think there is a problem with diversity. When I was asked to join this program, I was told, quite frankly, we need more people that look like you. I don't think they meant young and handsome. I think they meant people from a ethnic background like me, because there are particular barriers there. And I was happy to take part. And I think a lot of the barriers are actually common across different demographic groups. I think acceptance was one for me, and I see it for others. In the first few years, I only told a handful of people that I had Parkinson's. If I wasn't talking to my family about Parkinson's, I wasn't going to talk to a researcher. And 4 in 10 people say that they hide their condition. I think we need to help there. And I think, research or not, we have a duty to help those people. I think awareness, is another aspect. The first time I got involved in research was 7 years into my Parkinson's. And that was when I was asked, quite simply that. Somebody tapped me on the shoulder and said, would you like to take part in this? I said, sure. I didn't have any natural barrier other than that, other than I wasn't aware. And the last thing I'd say in terms of barrier, and perhaps more, not just for recruiting people for trials, but also retaining them, is one of apathy, which I see all over the community. And combine that with fatigue, combine that with cognitive impairment. Things are difficult for people with Parkinson's. We find the simplest thing extremely challenging, and we have to reduce the administration burden that we impose on people with Parkinson's that are taking part in trials. It's too much. And I'm not surprised there's an attrition rate of something like 30%. So we have to do more to recruit, and we have to do more to retain, because ultimately the only way out of this is through scaling and getting larger numbers, and particularly to fill those individual demographic groups which might have particular profiles of Parkinson's that we're yet to unearth.
Brilliantly said. I think this burden for recruitment for people with Parkinson's and staying on a trial are quite high. And how do we reduce that? Harris, I was going to ask you a question that came up. So in the event that one of the trials brings up a treatment that works, how do we get it to broad use quickly in terms of months, not years?
Oh yes, this is a critical question, an excellent question. So, there are so many factors involved here, and this goes all the way back to selection of compounds. Now we know which compounds EJS ACT-PD have selected wisely so for their trial for the MAMS. I have not mentioned what we have chosen for Hydra yet, and I don't want to mention it yet because we're still debating some of the compounds there before it's official. However, all the way from the selection of compounds, the possibility to take it all the way to the patient is one of the factors we select them on the basis of. So compounds which, unfortunately, compounds which may seem promising based on preclinical data or whatever, but where there is no chance to bring them to the patient as a regulated treatment, either because the company producing is blocking this or whatever other reason there might be, this obviously leads to them not being selected for the trial or not being prioritized at least. If it's very interesting, we'll put it on on the shelf. We'll go back to it if we can. So for compounds where there are no, let's say, intentional barriers, because these things unfortunately exist in the industry world, there we start working very closely with the EMA in our case, which is the European Medicines Agency, the master regulator for us, and with the Norwegian Medicines Agency, the NOMA. We start all the way from the design of the protocol to see, if the trial is positive and meets the endpoints that also are designed together with the regulators, how is this then going to be approved and how will be brought to the patients? It is a very complex process. There is the regulatory aspect, there's a legal aspect, but there's also the very pertinent need for an entity, usually in the form of a company, a pharmaceutical company, who's willing to take this to the market, because an academic institution cannot do that, obviously.
Yeah, so it's great to hear that the quick transition is part of the selection process for drugs.
Yes, but unfortunately not always possible.
Yeah, no.
We're very aware.
Ask another question about, someone's asking about the digital monitoring. I think that was for Georgia. And then also, I think Emma spoke a lot about statistics. So I'm going to also ask the AI question. Is anyone using AI to design some of these trials? So maybe Georgia first.
Thanks. So the digital devices study, it's a sub-study within the main trial. So any participants that take part in the EJS ACT-PD MAMS trial will be offered the opportunity to also take part in the digital devices sub-study. to give a really brief overview of what this will include, it's essentially a small device. It's a sensor that will get placed on your lower back. You'll wear it for a week, wear it consistently for that week, and then you'd send that back to the site, and that data will be uploaded and give us continuous data for the whole time you were wearing it on lots of different physical symptoms. So that will be offered to everyone in the trial, and you do that every 6 months. And just also to note, there's no upper age limit. I think I've seen that pop up a couple of times, but for our trial, there's no maximum age.
Great. It's great to hear there's no maximum age. So Emma, is AI being used to help with the design or the statistics or all the maths?
AI is such a broad umbrella word, isn't it? I'm not sure there's anything completely revolutionary to add here. We are also testing a kind of a movement device as well. I think we're trying to find a way to speed up, that first outcome measure to see if we can design the trial more quickly. The statisticians are also rapidly maybe using some help, I'm not sure, to try and work out if you can augment or kind of add outcome measures together to speed up the design as well. But I'm not sure I've got anything particularly useful to add here. I'm sure they'll be happy to try something though.
Yeah, fantastic. There's another question about Parkinsonism. Maybe Harris can address this one. So, how broad is the inclusion criteria? And if someone has something that's not typical Parkinson's, can they get on a trial?
And a very good question. And I think, this is unfortunately a limitation of trial design, because we need to design our trials in a way that they will allow us to get some conclusive answers. So for the Norwegian, Sleipner, and Hydra, for Hydra, we only include people with Parkinson's disease and at that idiopathic Parkinson's disease. I believe the situation is the same for the other MAMS platforms. Sleipner checks target engagement, whether a medication or a compound get into the brain and whether they act on the intended pathway. So, a positive result from Sleipner essentially validates or de-risks a compound for whatever use across, neurological, neurodegenerative diseases or neurological diseases even. So this has value across these diseases, but also Sleipner recruits Parkinson's disease. We have other trials for atypical Parkinson's, for individuals with PSP, MSA, for example, or corticobasal syndrome. We currently have in Norway a basket trial running where we randomize people with all these conditions and diseases into parallel arms, but it's a single compound at the moment on that trial.
Great.
It's called an ADAPT trial. ADAPT as in N-ADAPT, for those who are interested in finding more information.
Thank you. Thank you very much. So we're getting near the end, but Georgia, can I ask you the question about randomized? You mentioned people are randomized on double-blind basis, but later, say they're on a futile arm, how do they get re-randomized, and how is the breaking of the blindness occur?
Yes, a very good question. So everyone will be blinded throughout their whole time taking part in the trial, but we will have some unblinded statisticians who will be doing lots of work to look at the analyses and check what treatments seem to be working or not. So when they do those analyses at those early stage checks, if they can see a specific treatment doesn't seem to be having any effect, then ultimately what would happen is we will unblind the participants on that arm when we let them know that that treatment arm will be stopping. So anyone that's on an arm that stops will be made aware of what they were taking, and then they'll be offered to rejoin the trial if they wish to, I believe after a 6-week period.
Great. Thank you. Thank you very much. So there's been lots of interest on how to sign up for the UK trial. And as I mentioned, there will be an email to all registered people with a sort of a breakdown of what was discussed, but also a link to keep up to date on how to sign up for the ACT-PD trial. I'm just going to give a summary of what I think we heard today. So we've got a really nice introduction to this novel clinical trials platform, multi-arm, multi-stage clinical trial. The acronym being used a lot is MAMS. We've heard a lot about the work going on in Norway that Harris is a key member of, and the ACT-PD trial in the UK. So the advantages that we've heard about is that you can get information about clinical trials with much fewer participants, because we have one placebo arm and multiple drug treatment arms simultaneously. And if a drug treatment isn't working, we can cancel that and add in another arm. So the number of people is reduced. The cost is eventually reduced, although the initial cost is big, but also the time is reduced. We can get answers quicker. In Kuhan's eloquent description about the urgency and the need for new cures, let's be quite frank about it, we need a cure, is quicker. And the urgency question is what I think is most beautifully addressed with the MAMS trial. So the cost and the efficiency is also good, but the time is the major issue. So we heard about the recruitment process in Norway and how it's very flat. I think there is very little discrepancy about who can join trials or not, but it's not quite the case in the UK. And there's a very strong statement in the Q&A about lobbying UK government to level the playing field so that everyone in the UK and all 4 countries of the UK can participate, and not just the people that can overcome the costs of joining, but also overcome the administrative burden of joining. I think Kuhan made a really good point that the burden of joining these trials is just too high. And also, if I quote you again, Kuhan, if we're going to fail, try and fail, let's fail quickly and move on to the next drug, and just get it done. So I was really pleased to hear from everyone. Thank you all 4 panelists for engaging in this webinar, and we'll see you in about 3 months' time for the next one. Thank you very much.